Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to this special presentation of Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Hilary Fordwich, and today we're facing an almost unprecedented extended period of economic uncertainty brought on by near total gridlock from our elected federal leaders. That's why I'm joined here today by three highly qualified experts to discuss the impact on the government contracting community from the upcoming fiscal decisions, or lack thereof, from these same government officials. With me today is Gary Loyd, the Chief Executive Officer of Centurion Solutions. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning.
And also Bill Phillips, who heads up the KPMG federal practice.
Good morning, Hilary.
Good morning, Bill. And also Dan Forman, the partner in the government contracting group at the law firm of Crowell and Mooring.
Good morning, Hilary.
Thank you all for joining us. Let me thank you for being here, and particularly I'd like to move on to a question that our audience is very keenly aware of, that with the trifecta of the sequestration, debt ceiling, and also the expiration of the pending resolutions, do you think that things like the General Dynamics announcement a while ago of their great losses, is that typical of the marketplace, Gary? What do you think? Or do you think it's something unique?
Well, I think as companies are forced to reorganize and restructure, we're going to see other losses in the market. We're going to see reduced profits, best case. I think in the case of General Dynamics, they made 2 acquisitions, they failed. But they failed for a lot of reasons. It doesn't always mean 1 + 1 is 2 or 3. And in this case, maybe they failed because they didn't look at the right risk. They didn't assess the risk. They didn't look at the timing of the investment, the deal terms. There are a lot of variables that go into play on an acquisition, and that may have been the reason why it failed. I wouldn't really tie that strictly to the budget impasse.
Okay, and then what about you, Dan? Would you agree with that? Concur? What do you think?
I think that we're going to see more companies reporting lower earnings. I think we've already seen it with Lockheed and Northrop Grumman as well as GD. I think the extent of the GD loss may be unique. I think what's interesting about it is really it was centered more in the IT sector of the business. So that's, I think, something for other companies to look for. But other companies like L3 had a fairly strong fourth quarter. So I don't know that GD tells the entire story, but it certainly is an interesting milestone.
So not necessarily indicative of the entire marketplace, but what do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think the market today is mixed. There are companies who are growing, who are hiring people, who are winning new contracts. There are companies that are struggling because they're not. So it's a sort of mixed bag right now. So
do you think we're going to have more bad news, or do you think we're going to have some surprisingly good news, Gary?
Well, I think there's going to be mixed results. It's going to be a tough year. They're going to be, I think other companies have some acquisitions. You're going to see them, they're going to go south because there's so many factors that go into an acquisition today that need to be really looked at. So more discipline in that process, I think, is going to help. But it's tight right now. Budgets are tight, programs are getting slashed, programs are getting delayed. It's wreaking havoc and chaos in the market right now. So you're going to see, I think, losses coming year, and you're also, I think, in best case, reduced profits.
And do you think so, Dan?
I think what we're seeing with our client base is a number of our clients readjusting their expectations for 2013 downward. But I think it really depends on what segment of the government contracts market they're in, frankly, and obviously what happens with the upcoming deal between Congress or the President, or not, perhaps.
Yes. And then, of course, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bill, you were going to say?
Yeah, just to that last point. I think organizations and companies today that provide sort of staff augmentation kinds of projects are in danger. I think we're going to see a retrenching of that space. I think companies that are pure training organizations are going to be hard pressed. We're already seeing in the memos from leadership in agencies to cut training budgets, cut travel budgets.
Because they're discretionary.
That's exactly right. And so I think we're going to see those kinds of organizations much more affected much sooner than the larger ones that are providing major weapon systems to the Defense Department, for example. also are going to struggle as the numbers potentially go down of number of aircraft purchased and the like.
But things like national security, when we talk about cyber security, there are certain areas where there still is growth and potential because it's so critical now. You've seen growth in
healthcare IT.
Yes, healthcare IT.
We just released a client survey. So we surveyed hundreds of our clients, and 90% of these companies were impacted in their growth in 2012. This dramatic shift from best value to LPTA, that's had an impact on not only on contract performance for the government, but in earnings. We're seeing clients that have been stable for years, made really good decisions, and they're having to cut staff across the board because of the changes and the uncertainty in the marketplace right now. Now, that's not to say, so our clients aren't sitting idle. They're moving ahead, they're trying to make decisions as best they can to weather the storm. But they're making decisions to survive as well as compete. But the first order, how do we survive? Now, it's not the end of the world by any stretch,
no.
But I think a lot of clients, they're being cautious. Some are taking a wait-and-see attitude. Others are making those decisions to protect themselves.
So it's really going to be the firms that make the great decisions. And a final comment, Dan?
I would just say the wait-and-see approach has its risks, because whether or not there's going to be automatic budget cuts or negotiated budget cuts, we're going to see budget cuts. I mean,
Yes.
we're
Right.
in an age
It's
where
a 100% deficit. Yes,
the question is where they're going to be. And so I think what we're seeing now is really the uncertainty that's causing problems in the market.
And that's basically
and
it.
one final point, 11% of the respondents, though, just a little good news, 11% of the respondents are making investments. So 11%, 67% of the respondents, they're not hiring, they're reducing their temporary workforce.
Yes, so there is some positive outlooks there, and let's get to some of that in a moment, yes. Welcome back, and although we have a real crisis, and we all know that we do, there are those that speculate perhaps it's also a great self-fulfilling prophecy with all the doom and gloom news, and that really contractors aren't planning and contractors aren't investing because of that. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I mean, I think, as more and more people say the news is bad, something bad is going to happen, the rest of us who may not think that begin to believe that as well. And it's certainly, the uncertainty creates behavioral changes. It's the reason why companies are hoarding cash. It's the reason why companies are reluctant to hire people when maybe they have positions, but they're not sure, what the future of those positions are. So, yeah, there is a self-fulfilling dimension to this for sure.
And certainly, like they say, Apple has more Federal Reserve cash reserves than the federal government. So many companies are, in Lockheed and others.
Absolutely.
Yes,
yep,
Gary.
for sure.
The crisis is real. The threat of sequestration, the budget impasse, the national debt, that's a threat to our economy. It's already impacting national security. It's certainly impacting this industry. The real culprit when we look at this is the flow down. This is all flowing down. These issues, this indecision is causing problems at the agency level. All levels of government are reacting. They're causing delays which are further impact on our government contractors.
On anyone, and Dan, your clients, all the clients at Crowell & Moring must see this, do they?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if the furloughs that have been talked about actually kick in, what we're going to see is an incredible delay in everything from solicitations being issued to proposals being evaluated to award decisions being made. So I think that we talked about a logjam today. Well, if in fact there's no resolution and there's across the board cuts, and we're talking about furloughing every civilian employee
that's
of
right,
the U.S.
Dan.
government.
I mean, if you look at the four key things that happened last month, on January 25th, Deputy Defense Secretary DOD Ashton Carter said that sequestration budget cuts go into effect beginning March 1. Employees are going to be furloughed. On January 22nd, Army officials froze civilian hiring and ordered managers to terminate temporary employees. On January 14th, Rear Admiral J.P. Malloy told Navy commanders 1 day a week furloughs beginning the week of April 16th. DLA is going to furlough its entire workforce, 25,000 employees, up to 22 days between now and the end of the year.
So that has ramifications.
2 million jobs, non-defense and defense, at risk across the country.
And you're working with the federal government, Bill, so you must see this very closely.
Well, absolutely. We've already heard some comments here this morning, and the fact that this uncertainty in the government workforce is creating uncertainty in terms of what it means to the contractors. So we are seeing delays in RFPs. We are seeing delays in new contract awards. We're already beginning to see change in scope of contracts, change in scope down, by the way. And so the more uncertainty our clients have, the more uncertainty that creates for us.
And basically kicking the can down the road, kicking sequestration down the road hasn't helped at all, Dan?
No, well, even we saw a 22% drop in defense spending in the fourth quarter. even before they decided to kick sequestration down the road. And I think this kicking it down the road just perpetuates, as Bill and Gary both acknowledge, this uncertainty that's really causing companies to back off a little bit.
You know, government, their inability to achieve and agree on a balanced solution, it's these setting arbitrary deadlines. Right. That is just, you know, this indecision is not working the problem. The debt ceiling, kicking that can down the road, like Dan is saying, is just a symptom of government's inability to agree on a solution. As they're not businessmen, as Bill said, well, businesses need structures so they can plan around it.
You want predictability to the extent that you've got it. You know, I think that the one thing about kicking the can down the road is if we had confidence that by kicking the can down the road we were going to have a dialogue and a better solution than sequestration. I mean, sequestration is the worst solution.
Yes.
So if we could have a better solution by kicking the can down the road, well, that might be a bit of a good news, but it's not clear that that's what's going to happen.
So what are you doing to advise your clients, Dan, in this government contracting clients in this milieu?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is, and I think that's really important for companies who are bidding, is to really revisit the way they strategize and attack a particular solicitation. What we're seeing are many procurements where in the past you would expect price not to be the most important consideration and sort of technical quality to be the driving force. We're now seeing a greater emphasis on price. We're seeing procurements that you really would normally expect to see on a cost reimbursement basis now being led on a fixed price basis, so you shift the risk to the contractor. So I think the contractors that are nimble and that are able to adjust their bidding strategies and that are able, frankly, to absorb smaller margins and really focus in on sharpening their pencil are the companies that are going to will fare better.
So is this, so here's an exit question, is this the new normal, or are things going to get better? Gary?
Well, I think it is the new normal, but I think back to your question on what are we advising clients. You know, we surveyed all of our clients. You can find the results on our website, centurionresearch.com, but we're suggesting clients do 5 key things. You know, need to hunker down, eliminate those non-essential costs, and look at streamlining your operations. That's one. Spend valuable time with your customer. You know, it's like Bill's saying, that open dialogue is critical at all levels, not just solving sequestration, but how are they going to tackle their budget problems and the pressures that their current government customers are under. Don't make any hasty decisions. I mean, that is so important. Stay the course as long as you can. When government contractors lay off those employees, if government makes some favorable decisions, which we all hope for, and that means favorable for these clients, and they've laid off that workforce, it's just going to hinder their recovery.
Okay.
You know, don't take unnecessary risks, and more discipline in business development, mergers and acquisitions, and working with your clients.
So those that are more discipline and more structure, and the 5 points that Gary mentioned. Thank you, Gary. Welcome back. We're talking about, is this the new normal, which I think most of us hope that it isn't, or what is going to be the reality, and sort of what is the future going to look like in terms of reality? Bill?
In a word, yes, I think it is the new normal. Obviously, the economy grows and expands and it shrinks and contracts. You know, those are the normal, you know, sine waves that you have. But I think that this is where we are now, and I think that for the foreseeable future, as we try to resolve our budget issues that are real, that we are going to go through a protracted period of time in which this is the way things are. Hopefully, we'll have a deal in place so that we know what the new normal is, but it's not the heady days of you know, 5 or 6 years
ago. And we're
ago.
not going to go back to that. Gary?
Completely agree. I mean, given our national debt and the pressures that we're under right now, I don't see any improvement anytime in the near future.
So get used to it.
Get used to it. This is the new normal. But I think once companies adapt, at least, you know, the austerity is the new normal. We'll be able to survive. But I do want to, you know, I received a letter yesterday from Northrop Grumman's chairman, president, CEO, Wes Bush, and he's encouraging us, all of us, to get involved, get that word out to the congressional leadership and the administration. This is a real crisis. This is having an impact in government and in industry. And let's go to our congressmen and let's try to get things.
Because he's trying to get that influence to push them to get that deal done. Right, Wes was doing that. Yes.
And I think what we may see, and I think it's the new normal to some extent. I wouldn't I wouldn't give it too much shelf life, I think, but certainly short-term it's the new normal. But
our audience is going to love that.
What I would say is, though, that earlier in the program we mentioned that there's a lot of these companies that are stockpiling cash, and what I think part of the new normal, at least short-term, is there's been I would say, not a lot of activity in the M&A front on the government contract side, but I think what we may be seeing, at least short-term, is sort of a government contractor Darwinism. I think the strong will survive. I think we're going to see some of the smaller and mid-sized companies who cannot really afford to lose programs.
There'll be contraction because they'll be gobbled up.
Well, I think there's going to be,
yes.
I think the upside of that is that for the companies that have maintained cash reserves, there's probably going to be some good bargains in the government contract.
And they're getting ready to gobble up some of those other ones.
I suspect that we'll see some, think we're going to see an uptick in acquisitions as this goes forward.
Yes.
Your billion-dollar plus companies, they do have those cash reserves. Unfortunately, there are hundreds of small and mid-sized companies. They're using those cash reserves to weather the storm, to operate.
Yes.
They're losing employees, they're having to lay off employees, their profits are substantially reduced. They've invested heavily in procurements. Those procurements are being delayed. That further reduces resources available to go after those deals.
And what we're seeing from the legal...
weather is a very small storm. That's the problem for those companies.
And also, Bill talked about the workforce. You said about the workforce. They're able to weather this, but the procurement is being affected by the workforce.
Yeah, I'm convinced, and we're seeing it across the federal government, that the quality of the federal acquisition workforce is declining. I mean, it's through any number of reasons. The current crises are only adding to that, but we're seeing
a lot of mature procurement officers have retired.
That's right, and we're seeing decisions being made that were probably not the right decisions or were not done properly, and so we're seeing protests.
By the book because they're younger. And
the bottom line is, it's one more contributor to the fact that it's taking procurements longer to be completed. The number of protests go up, and then again, small and medium-sized companies they can't weather. Right.
And that's what
a 6-month protest.
Well, I think those small and medium-sized companies. You make the point about protests. I mean, I think those small and medium-sized companies have one of the reasons why we've seen an uptick in the number of protests the last few years is because those smaller and medium companies are now becoming protesters. Historically, they weren't, and I think that trend is going to continue as every procurement dollar becomes so critical to the bottom line of some of the smaller companies. I'd also say one other thing for the smaller companies that they really should be thinking about, and even larger companies, if the cuts come through, there's going to be a number of terminations, and it's really important for companies to be prepared to be able to move out and make sure that they're not leaving money on the table, get their termination claim machines moving and working, and making sure their documentation is in order, because if your program gets cut, at a minimum, you want to be able to recover the termination liability that you're entitled to, and I think it's important for companies to think about that moving forward.
Yeah, I think companies have become are becoming more savvy in that space.
And aggressive.
I agree.
And aggressive, that's right. And that's not just because the pie is shrinking, so to speak, but it's because they're seeing mistakes. They're seeing problems that they need to respond to that they probably didn't see 5 or 10 years ago.
And I would think that down legally, they have to be more prepared to actually anticipate this new environment than they would previously.
Absolutely. I think the protest process has become part of the business capture strategy for a lot of companies.
It's almost a regular step in the process.
Absolutely.
You're seeing that, and it's become de rigueur to go through that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. Welcome back, and of course we're all used to tough news and negative news, but we'd like now to turn to something positive. Dan, do share with our audience something positive, maybe a big procurement coming down the pike. What do you see as positive news?
Well, I guess there's always state and local procurements, right? So that's positive. But in all seriousness, I think that as we've sort of all agreed all today that one of the biggest things holding us back right now is the uncertainty, and that regardless of how this comes out, we're very close to knowing the answer. And so the period of uncertainty it should be over relatively soon. So I think that's a piece of positive news, and hopefully once companies know where we are, whether that's because we've got a negotiated resolution or because we have automatic cuts, at least we know what we have, and companies can then start moving forward.
And that's what Bill had said earlier about they need structure, they need some degree of certainty to move forward. Gary, what about positive news or major procurement?
Well, I might be the optimist in the group.
Good.
I mean, the federal government is still one of the largest pools of opportunity for businesses in the world. You know, and at Centurion, we ran a search using our BI Now Federal Opportunities Database, identified over 50 programs, RFP release date over the next 12 months. And the value of those programs, these are programs of $1 billion each, and the total value of all those programs combined, $263 billion. The average length of those is about 5 years, 7 years. Out of that, we believe that 65%, this is what Centurion believes, 65% of those programs, this is well over $200 billion, they're going to survive sequestration cuts.
So there's going to be an avalanche of opportunity.
There are opportunities. You know, you look at GSA Oasis, $10 billion plus opportunity, could be as much as $48 billion. And I think Dan had talked about it earlier. One of the key things that GSA is doing, and I love it, they are using social media to interact with government contractors. There's about 300 companies that are interacting with government, with GSA to shape that opportunity.
So it's also smaller companies have that opportunity then as well, which is good for the economy.
All companies, full spectrum, set-asides, all different sides of company services, duration, customers. It covers NASA, you know, HHS, Commerce, Department of Education, DHS, Treasury, you know, Air Force, AFCAP, $10 billion, Army Teach, $8 billion, DHS PACS, $1.5 billion, GSA Oasis, INSCOM, $5 billion. You know, these are some real good opportunities, and GSA might be one of the opportunities to set a trend of how government will interact. Dan touched on this, and Bill touched on this earlier, to interact with the government contracting community.
So it could be more positive, and it could be better interaction.
And we've got to help government understand that LPTA is not the way of the future.
No, nobody wants lowest price technically acceptable.
At a minimum, government, please try to define what technically acceptable means.
Actually.
That's a good step.
Yes. And Bill, what do you see? You have a vast government contract.
So it's clear the government continues to spend money, and they will continue to spend money. We see in healthcare IT, you know, the impact of the Affordable Care Act. We see in our business, in the financial operations, financial management improvement, audit readiness in defense and intel, we see business growing. In cybersecurity, we see business growing.
So that's national security.
That's exactly right. So that business is out there. That's not going away because we need it for the country. But uncertainty makes it tough. But we're going to get through this, and I think companies will survive, and companies will be strong. And I think the government will be strong as well. That's
good to hear, Bill. And I think Dan's point is that there will be some decisions soon, as long as that can does not get kicked any further. Now, in terms of when there are opportunities and all the immense amount of opportunities that Gary just mentioned, Key Solutions, the sponsor of the show, provides capture strategy and proposal support to win government contracts. What do you think, given it's a question I love to ask everybody always, what do you think are the keys to winning from your perspective for your clients, Dan?
Well, I agree with Gary that the trend toward technical acceptability, low price is not a healthy trend necessarily in terms of achieving best value, but I do think that in the short term we're going to see that trend. And so I think companies who, as I said earlier, are able to adapt from really building up robust technical solutions with less concern about what the cost may be, need to sort of dial that back a little bit and start thinking about how to deliver more cost-effective and lower cost or price solutions, at least in the short term.
In the short term, yes, to win contracts. What about winning contracts from your perspective, Gary?
I think be proactive for your customer, not reactive to your customer. Work that relationship. You've got to strengthen that relationship, establish yourselves. Government agencies are facing some real challenges today. They're going to slash programs, they're going to cut programs. Get out in front of those programs. You want to be the one that's going to survive. Make fact-based decisions. The old days, those are gone. You've got to really, and you touched on it, Hillary, fact-based decisions in your business development and capture process to move things forward.
And much tighter than they were before.
Much tighter. Be open and honest with your government customer. You've got to demonstrate your ability to deliver value.
And that's
You've got to demonstrate your ability. And know your customer, know their issues, know their trends, know their pain points, and work towards solving their problems.
Thank you, Gary. Bill, KPMG, you're an actual government contractor, so you're obviously doing lots of those things because you have a vast practice. Anything else that you see from KPMG, how you serve the government, what takes to win?
You know, you can't take anything for granted.
As the incumbent.
As the incumbent, you can't take anything for granted. Even when you think you're shaping programs, you can't take that for granted. You've got to stay close to your client. You've got to take nothing for granted, and you've got to spend time and invest the time in understanding their issues and helping them understand your capabilities.
And obviously you do that at KPMG because you have such a great practice there. Yes. I really hope that all of you have found information presented today by our great panelists to be useful. And we're always seeking some level of certainty, and we're seeking clarity in the best path forward. So remember, in spite of these issues, it's still an honor and it's still a privilege for all of us to be working on behalf of our government. As it is still beneficial to be in this business, it's a wonderful way to serve our nation. Speaking of serving, I want to take a moment to congratulate AOC Key Solutions, the sponsor of this Government Contracting Weekly, on their recent announcement of serving their clients by helping to secure more than $9 billion in government contracting wins in 2012, and always via principle-centered winning. Let me close by thanking our experts this morning who joined us, all of whom serve multiple government contracting clients, and Bill, who serves the federal government. Dan Forman of Crowell and Mooring, thank you, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
For coming this morning, thank you. And also Gary Loyd of Centurion Research Solutions.
Thank
Gary.
you, good to be here.
And also, thank you very much to Bill for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
We also appreciate your time and your valuable insights and all that you've given our audience this morning.
Thank you.
I also, of course, want to thank you, our viewers, for joining us once again, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Government Contracting Weekly. The episode of Government Contracting Weekly you just watched might well be the most important show we have produced thus far. This seemingly endless cycle of inaction by our elected officials is clearly beginning to take its toll on our government contracting community, as well as our nation and arguably even the global economy. Today we heard from three leaders who are uniquely positioned with a panoramic view of government contracting. Gary Loyd, the Chief Executive Officer of Centurion Research Solutions, Dan Forman, a partner in the Government Contracts Group of Crowell and Mooring, and Bill Phillips, Principal in charge of KPMG's Federal Advisory Services. My hope is that Gary, Dan, and Bill's words are beneficial to your business. For me personally, I found the discussion as to whether or not we're simply suffering from a phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecy brought on by too much talk of gloom and doom, or whether the problems we are faced are very real and consequentially compelling. Sadly, their answer is we're suffering from both. This discussion barely touches upon the dreadful price we may all pay as we weaken our national defenses and thoughtlessly slash other critical programs which may have negative ramifications for untold years to come. We cannot allow this dysfunctional, ongoing cycle of stalemates, crisis after crisis, and the seemingly inevitable kicking of the can down the road to remain the new norm. More than ever, we need real leaders who are courageous enough to fulfill their duty and to serve the best interests of our nation. While there is actually some good news on the horizon and an avalanche of procurements to flow once decisions are finally made, there is also a very real price we are all paying for the self-inflicted wound being imposed on our nation by our government. In that regard, I want to take a moment to speak directly to our elected federal officials and add my voice to the countless others who urge you, our most important leaders, to be decisive, to unite, to put partisan pettiness aside, to end this unbearable uncertainty, and to allow not only the government contracting community, but the entire economy as a whole to move forward and to thrive.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.